For those of you that don't know me, I'm Judith, and I'm the youngest child of Barb and Ray. The eldest obviously being Heather, and then Stephen, and they finally got it right on the third try. The three of us feel very privileged to have had both of our parents alive and pretty healthy for over 60 years of our lives. This is quite a rare thing amongst our friends. As you have already heard, my father had a famous quote that he often shared: "Never let the truth get in the way of a good story." So I'm going to follow that advice today, so don't bother with the fact-checking, okay? My dad was one of the 5 children, eldest boy of Sid and Sheila, younger brothers Robin and Neil, which are here today, and his older sisters Norma and Velma, who are deceased, and of course husband of Barb for nearly 70 years. My father was different to most fathers. He didn't smoke, he didn't drink alcohol, and he certainly didn't do religion. I actually think that this was a great gift that he gave to his children. No religion meant we didn't just become followers. My dad taught us we could be good people without following religion, and to question things, to think critically for ourselves. To his credit, and of course Mum, they raised 3 good children who all contribute to society and give back to their communities through volunteering. Dad worked at Dandenong City Council most of his life. His father also worked there, over 30 years of taking his homemade lunch every day with his thermos of hot water, a glass bottle of coffee and chicory essence, and a tube of evaporated milk in a brown leather Gladstone bag, all thanks to Barb, of course. We worked, lived and socialised in Dandenong. Our grandparents also lived in Dandenong, and I would walk past my grandparents' house every high school day. We lived our childhood lives in Dandenong, with all 3 of us getting married and leaving home from that address of 3 Stevenson's Avenue. It was a humble home. We lived in a modest 3-bedroom house, all 5 of us, with only 1 toilet and 1 bathroom. There was an oil heater in the lounge, and shock horror, a briquette hot water service that you had to light a fire every morning to have hot water. We never questioned it, we just did it. There was no air conditioning either, just 1 fan. We did get an above-ground pool to keep us cool on those hot summer days, and Dad rigged up this solar hot water system on the garage roof to extend its use. Dad would always be on at us kids about dropping our G's. Morning. It's not morning, it's morning. Don't drop your G's. And if you dragged your feet, it would be lift your damn feet. So we always got a lecture in the car when visiting anyone, that when we were offered biscuits, we could only take 1 biscuit. Even if they offered a second biscuit, we were to decline, because it would be terrible to be seen as a guts. And this from the man who you could see could impress his grandchildren by shoving a whole Tim Tam in his mouth in one go. We had a Franklin caravan for holidays, and off we would go to Lakes Entrance, and Dad would go fishing, as you've heard, at Burnt Bridge. We even had a bright green canoe until we lent it to an uncle who lost it. We went with our caravan and neighbours to Glen Maggie, I think it was, one year, and parked our van next to an old man in a tent. Dad would chat to him, and one morning we were bundled into the car, and there was lots of whispering going on between Mum and Dad. And she was to drive us out for a day trip without Dad, which was really, really strange to go anywhere without Dad, not returning until the afternoon. Unbeknown to us, the old man in the tent hadn't appeared, and Dad, being worried, peeked in and found him dead in the tent. So Dad wanted to protect us from the police and the dead body. My father volunteered as you know, when Stephen was in Scouts, and we used to do a paper drive in those days to raise funds. People would drop off their old newspapers out to our house, and Dad would tie them up in bundles in the garage, hours on end of bundling and stacking up newspapers. It probably didn't make much money either, but that's what we did. As Stephen mentioned, Dad was a keen cricketer, and the neighbourhood boys would come and knock on the door and say, "Mrs. Black, is it okay if Mr. Black can come out and play cricket with us?" So when one of the neighbourhood kids years later came out as gay, Dad said, "I knew it, he used to bowl sidearm." Who knew that Ray had the first gaydar? It became a bit of a family joke about your bowling abilities after that. But having said that, my father never cared about anyone's sexuality. He treated people equally before DEI was even a thing. My father took my brother once to the Sandown race course, I think it was, to see the car racing. He brought my brother home soon after leaving, as he couldn't cope with all the men swearing around my brother, and my brother's never sworn since. Dad was also very annoyed with Mum's mother, my grandmother, or our grandmother, when we were very little. She took us for a counter meal at a pub. What was she thinking, taking his children to a pub? He told her it was never to happen again, and neither Heather, Stephen nor I have ever been to a pub ever again. Now, Dad wasn't your average Aussie dad. He hated foul effing language. He didn't drink beer. He didn't smoke, and he never followed football, despite often winning the football tipping competitions. I don't think he ever went to the football. However, cricket was different. Yes, that was for gentlemen. He also loved tennis, and his brother Neil had a tennis court. And back in the day, he thought he would show my new boyfriend, Robert, a thing or two about tennis, and he invited him for a game. Robert, of course, being much younger and fitter, beat him handsomely. My dad reminded him that if he wanted to continue to date his daughter, he could have done the gentlemanly thing and at least let him win. Ray decided to retire after over 30 years at the Dandenong Council and moved to the farm in Foster after we had all left home. They had bought the farm a few years earlier with the help of the Bank of Robin, his younger brother. This was a place that our family, extended family and friends would all love to visit. My dad would try his hand at many different ventures: sheep, both shearing and lambing, cows, potty calves, chooks, goats, alpacas, all sorts of things. Never rewarding him in monetary value, but providing a real sense of being in the right place. He loved those hills. My father, as you've heard, loved a good political discussion. This is a hard bit for me. And was so proud when at 17 I joined the Young Liberals. Now, don't judge me, okay? I was young, I was naive, and I didn't realise the error of my ways. I've matured since then, and I'm definitely not responsible for Tony Abbott or Scott Morrison, just Malcolm Fraser. It was a shame in the last few years that he couldn't discuss the political situation, especially with all the palaver lately in America. He also loved fishing in his boat and being on the water, especially with Keith and Ian. One time he decided to take Robert and our young daughters out on his boat. He took them down to Tura with the boat hitched to the truck. He reversed it on the boat ramp, and Rob and Dad got out of the truck to unhitch the boat, leaving the girls in the truck. Now, Dad's handbrake was faulty, which he knew as he had a chuck of wood to put behind the tyre. The truck boat and trailer was sliding into the water with Robert and Dad trying to push or hold the truck out of the water to no avail. Next minute, our daughters are sitting inside with their seatbelts on, yelling, "The Lamingtons are floating, Dad!" We never let him forget that one, and it took some effort to get all of the salt water out of the fuel tank. Now, my father loved boat motorcycles, as you've seen, which leads me into another little story. Many years ago, my parents were visiting our family home in East Malvern, and we were sitting around the dining table, and my dad said something about if he won the lotto. Now, Robert, my husband, said, "Well, what would it change for you? Like, what would you spend it on?" My mum said, "Don't worry, he won't have a problem spending it." He was not known for being frugal. Now, my dad turned to Rob and said, "I'd buy an AJS motorcycle like I used to have and race." After they left, Robert said, "I think we should get him one." Me, being a tight ass, said, "Don't be ridiculous." Anyway, Robert got onto eBay and found one. Now, what followed was a lot of haggling and chatting to a strange man located in all of the places Merboo. He wasn't keen on selling us a motorcycle that we hadn't seen, but the photos looked good, and I said, "We don't know anything about motorcycles anyway." So we arranged a little surprise that, to be fair, the seller performed beautifully. He could have got an Oscar for his performance. We rang Dad and asked him to do us a favour, saying, "Robert has purchased something on eBay and we needed him to pick it up as it was in Merboo. He would need to take the truck." Now, he knew Robert wasn't into motorbikes, so we just told him it was a bike. Now, we didn't actually tell any lies. So Dad arrived. The seller had a Harley motorcycle, I think. It was a bicycle, motorcycle that he was polishing as Dad arrived. My dad started drooling and told the man what excellent taste he had and gave him a big long spiel about how he used to race old motorcycles, blah, 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 blah. And the man, probably trying to get on with his business, said, "I suppose you want to see the bike you're picking up?" Dad said, "Yeah, I better load it up." The man walked him over to the shed and pulled back the sheet and said, "This is what they have bought for you. A perfect vintage 1956 AJS with jam pots." Don't ask, I don't know what the hell jam pots are, but apparently the suspension. Dad was speechless. He said, "No, that can't be right. I'm picking up a bicycle." The seller said, "Well, this is what they paid for." He couldn't believe it, and he loved that bike. He loved the story, and he loved the sentiment behind it. That bike was, many years later, sold back to the lady or the eBay seller for the same price, and that lady's here today, and which was a fitting home for it. As you all know, my father was just great with technology. Well, he definitely knew how to use the remote control on the television, but he never used a computer, never used email, never had a mobile phone, no Facebook or Instagram either. He was never rich in the financial sense, but he was never poor either. He was wealthy in what mattered to him. He had a wife and children that loved him, 5 grandchildren that loved him, and now 2 great-grandchildren. He also had the ugliest, fattest wombat of a dog in Tiger, who was loved and driven around Foster on his mobility scooter, because we all know Tiger needed that mobility scooter more than Dad. Ray lived on his farm and land that he loved. He never hankered for travel outside of this country. He truly loved the land he stood on. Many years ago, we had an exchange student from Germany for 12 months. We still consider Julia part of our family. She loved being at the farm and showing her parents when they visited how she could ride a 4-wheeler. She sent us flowers this week, and I would like to share what she said in the card. She said, obviously I remember Ray at the farm with his strong presence. He said to me, everyone should go on exchange to see that the people on the other side of the world are just as crazy as the ones at home. She ended with, safe travels, Ray. See you whenever, wherever. To live 91 years in good health and to be loved by your family and friends is a life well lived.
Thanks, Judith. And Dad's AJS story goes one further. When Stephen and I and Michael moved to Melbourne North, one of the people that we met in a coffee shop one day was talking to us about motorbikes. The subject of motorbikes came up, and I was saying that Dad had this bike, and it turned out that Val and Alan lived down the road, and Val and I still have coffee together most Wednesday mornings. Thank you, Val, and for your contribution to Dad's life. Thanks everyone for their contribution to Dad's life and for listening to our recollections of Dad. Thank you also to Prom Country Aged Care and Dr. Owen Casson for their care and understanding of Dad's wishes during his final days, and for their support and assistance given to Mum and the family. We must also thank the Foster Football Netball Club and the Foster Hospital Auxiliary for their support and assistance in getting this show up and happening in a short space of time. I, for one, am glad that the Hospital Auxiliary is doing the catering and not Dad, as his cooking skills left much to be desired. I clearly remember walking in one afternoon with Mum and going, what is that smell? It was pizza being heated in the oven with the plastic wrap still on it. It remains a memorable show of Dad's lack of cooking ability. Please join us now for that well-earned cuppa and a bite to eat. And who's up for the Tim Tam challenge? While you're at it, if you could share your favourite stories of Ray with us, that would be very much appreciated. Thank you everyone for coming.